Thank you, everybody. I'm just going to buy some time for my mother to find a seat there before we... That's my mother. She came from Hokkaido today. Some family here. And first of all, thank you for hosting me at the American Club. As Drew mentioned, I grew up right around the corner, Sanno Byoin to Sacred Heart to Nishimachi. And so it's great to be back here and receive this warm welcome. So forging a career in photography, I was thinking about the title, and forging is such a, in so many ways, a Wall Street word for me. Like, it implies steel and iron and power and strength and so on. And I realized that as I was thinking about this, that so much of what I did was actually kind of piece together a career in photography. It wasn't as simple as just simply, I'm going to do it, and it happens. And so I was thinking about that a lot. And then I was thinking again, what does it really come down to? And I crossed that out again, as you see, and I said, really, it's about why I love photography. And I had a lot of thoughts last night, this morning, and so on, and I kind of rewrote a bit of my speech. So if you'll bear with me, I'm taking a few liberties with the title, but I'd like to begin. So if we could dim the lights, please. I promised lots of pictures. I'll try and move quickly along. And yeah, here we go. The drone of the ferry's engine drowned out the sound of the whipping wind. I was out on the deck and photographing this foggy landscape. No one was outside due to the heavy rain. This is on the Seto Inland Sea. And I turned around to head back down to the passenger deck when I saw this scene. And this says a lot about how I go about making photographs. I held my breath so as not to disturb the woman who was playing on her phone, quintessential Japanese squat, right? And I waited for those islands in the distance. I waited for the ferry to advance so that those islands came clear, aside from those pillars, so we could see them articulately. I love having two worlds, the world of the landscape above and the world below, two different worlds. And so as I said, I had this speech written originally about my glamorous life in photography, how I have zero regrets about the path I chose, and highlighting all the steps I took along the way. But the truth is that this very morning, I hit a low point in my photographic life. Amid the accolades I'm gratefully receiving from press and visitors to my exhibition, I actually felt like I'd sold out and that I'd lost my way, trying too hard to project myself as an artist. And I needed to take a long, hard look in the mirror to look at where I had come from and also where I was going. And as an artist, one of the challenges we face is putting value on our work. I hate putting a price on a print or a job. How does one put a dollar figure on something that may take you an instant to make, but took years of practice, trial and error, blood, sweat and tears, travel expenses, and so on? Everything that goes into learning a craft to the point where you can call yourself a professional. And as artists, it's very difficult sometimes to stomach when we see, some people can spend large sums of money on a baseball card or a fancy watch, maybe a bottle of wine or collectible car, but we don't quite value art the same way, unless maybe it's been deemed by the gatekeepers of the fine art world to be worthy. It also helps to be dead, I suppose, as Van Gogh found out, and the photographer Edward Weston, both of whom died broke. And I think one of the key differences between a successful artist or photographer and an unsuccessful one is perseverance. How long can you keep making photographs without financial sustainability? I realized this morning at near rock bottom the truth. I've always said photography saved my life. From the time it first called to me when I was a boy and received a little 35mm film camera from my parents, I have been in love with photography. a love as deep as anything I have ever felt in my life. So I decided I would tell you this story instead. It's 2014, and I'm living in New York City. I was at a crossroads in my life as I battled depression, a broken relationship, a dead end in my career. I needed to make a change in my life before it was too late. At that time, I took a one-day photography class in Brooklyn and found my love of photography rekindled. Inspired by a photograph of wild horses running toward a gathering storm that reminded me of my childhood love of the Black Stallion books by Walter Farley, I enrolled in a week-long class taught by Nebraskan photographer Brett Erickson and flew out to Santa Fe, New Mexico that very same weekend. This is that photograph. I longed to be free of the chains that held me down. I wanted to break out of my daily anguish. Brett took me under his wing as a teacher and as a friend, and someone who could understand my pain. He also gently nudged me along in my exploration of photography. Brothers like him are what I love about photography. These are all photographs I made during that workshop. I returned to New York that fall of 2014, having found my calling. I love that expression, our calling. What does it all mean if we don't do what we love? I attended Photoville, an outdoor festival of photography in Brooklyn, and I dreamed of one day exhibiting my work there. Having dreams, again, are what I love about photography. So I donated 15 bags of dressy clothes and put all my things in storage and gave up the lease on my loft in Chelsea. I enrolled in another workshop in Santa Fe, this time with longtime National Geographic photographer Sam Abel. Comfortable shoes are another reason why I love photography. A week before Santa Fe, I made an impromptu trip to Cuba. I hired a 1955 Pontiac, 60 years old, electric green, and kept it in immaculate condition by its owner-driver, Ivan, whose second and third greatest loves of his life were his wives, one of whom lived in Havana and the other who lived in the West. I met them both. The greatest love of his life, of course, was his car. We hurtled around the country at breathtaking speeds, and I photographed the scenes and the people from the passenger window in the great American tradition of the road trip. Just before I embarked, in a colorful alley in Havana, I met American photographer Caroline White. She's in the audience today. We've only met twice prior to this over the past 7 years, but have stayed close friends. Friends like her are also what I love about photography. Cuba was wonderful and all, and I could go on and on with stories, perhaps another time, but a fire was burning deep within me, and I needed to join Sam in Santa Fe. This is a Sam Abel style photograph of Sam. He is a master of small details, and so I've placed myself in a position such that Sam's face and hat fit in between the pendant lamp ceiling fan and the Coca-Cola sign. And I've photographed him such that his head and shoulders rise above an imaginary horizon line, as well as making a portrait of his back. All methods Sam employs to give dignity to people when he photographs them. At the end of the workshop, he pulled me aside and told me that if I truly wanted to become a photographer, he would help me, but that the path he took to National Geographic prominence was now closed. The modern road to becoming a professional photographer was anything but easy. Looking back, I was over the moon to hear him encourage me to pursue this path, but I also realize now that I was hopelessly naive. Many dear and trusted friends told me that my career goals were unrealistic and that I should maintain a steady job in finance while doing photography on weekends. But I'm just not wired that way, I suppose. I applied for and became an unpaid intern at the Santa Fe photographic workshops and learned about lighting and portraiture and many other subjects related to photography. But setup photographs were not my calling. I cared more about real life. My fellow interns, like the one diving off the cliff there, were all young art students, and I was the old fogey in the group. I bought a used 4x4 and drove around the western United States. Being on the road, I was very much alone, but also I felt happy. Happy to be alive, happy to have a camera in my hand every day. In the summer of 2015, this was the extent of my possessions. Kind of wish I could go back to that, you know? I would wind up spending a span of 990 days on the road. It wasn't planned that way, it just became so. Some of the 990 were more fruitful than others. This photograph and the next were made on the same day in 2 different locations. These Mennonite women taking pictures themselves at the now iconic Instagram spot, Horseshoe Bend, would become my first published photograph in Photo District News magazine. Now, unfortunately, like Life magazine, relegated to the annals of history. It was made in 2016, a year into my journey. If I'm perfectly honest, there were moments where I wondered if anyone would notice if I never returned that day from a hike into the desert. I think that my family in Japan and Canada would have noticed eventually, perhaps in a few days, but that was how alone I felt. I think back now and realize how much I must have made my mother worry, and I'm sorry about that, Mom. Japan, of course, beckoned me, usually for work, as I tried to create a means for making a living. I started producing photography workshops in Japan for the Santa Fe workshops, leveraging my business background, my knowledge of the country beyond Kyoto and Tokyo, but they didn't value my contributions, and so we parted ways. But I continued to explore my love and respect for everyday life and culture in my birthplace. Koiten is a Japanese saying that literally means red one spot, but refers to one bit of beauty in an otherwise drab landscape. I love how alone that also makes me feel. And all along, I was becoming more and more aware of how the world is constantly in flux. Things are never permanent, as we have all experienced over the past 2 years. My calling is that I photograph everyday life, real life, things that most people would walk past because it wasn't interesting enough to document. All I want to say to the world is, stop a moment, come here, take a look at this, but to do so without much fuss, to make it feel just right. But what fun it is to balance a fireball sunset just between the wires as my slow train rumbles along the tracks on a rural train line. Or to place all the players as one train arrives and the other one leaves. At a parade in Hagi, Japan, I was prepared for this moment when the tassels of the ceremonial saddle would frame the gentleman's face. By the way, the poster on the left says in Buddhism, the concept of tomorrow does not exist. 仏法には明日ということはあるまじき. This is a farmer's market in Shikoku. I photographed Japan in a way that reflected the respect I feel for this country and its people. Kodawari is a term that means the pursuit of perfection, doing your very best, and that is what I put into every photograph that I make. Even the snapshots. Sam taught me this as well. The path to greatness is through goodness, and if you make good snapshots, they will lead to great photographs. An example of the little things I pay attention to through the rhythm of life that are like sketches. This is a scene we're all familiar with in Japan, the airport tarmac staff waving goodbye to a plane while we taxi toward the runway. This is the same scene, but a split second later, when I timed it to photograph the moment when the plane's red light would blink and light the reflective jackets. Eventually, as my work took me back more and more to my motherland, I made the decision to move back to Tokyo in the summer of 2017. Re-entry was not as smooth as I envisioned. Friends had left Japan or had moved on to other pursuits. While surviving in the Southwest by living out of guest homes was feasible, living in Tokyo and paying rent on no salary was difficult. But I believed in the possibilities that existed here if I combined my ideas with my vision and endeavored to start many programs and projects to piece together a living. That led to my doing this for a career. For example, I assisted on American photographer Jamie Stilling's project of documenting Japanese solar power plants from above in a helicopter. Well, while I'm assisting, I decided to start making pictures of the landscape I saw from above. Or from my bullet train window as a mother and son gaze back at my speeding Shinkansen in a classic Japanese scene. Here it is again, red one spot, ko itten. In 2019, I journeyed from the far north of Hokkaido in Wakkanai to Hagi in southern Japan by train with Sam and his best friend and renowned color photographer Arthur Meyerson in a buddy trip we dubbed the Tres Amigos Japan Tour. We had the t-shirts to prove it. Mentors like these amazing photographers are also what I love about photography. On that trip, during one of our many hotel bar conversations about life and art and photography, we talked about the idea of photography as an exercise in problem solving. Each day, we're presented with a photographic problem, and we must set out to solve it. In this case, 3 panels, 3 windows. I'm waiting for that woman to raise her glass. Here's an ongoing problem with photography. 40 billion photographs have been posted on Instagram since its inception, 95 million plus a day. How do you make one's photographs have staying power? And I think that maybe they'll have staying power if they make you feel something inside. I can't say for sure. I think that the demarcation line between a photograph that works and one that doesn't is often very thin. Here, the hand, silhouetted inside the white space of the apron, is the crucial component in this photograph. But for me, all these technical things about a photograph serve only to convey the feeling within a frame to a viewer. When the technical elements get in the way of that flow, a photograph doesn't work. Louis Pasteur famously said that chance favors the prepared mind. This is every bit real life. As young students on a school trip, inexplicably happened to walk, run, leap at the same time at the DT Suzuki Museum of Zen, where none of this kind of thing should be happening to begin with. We have a word for this sort of thing in Japanese too. It's called ichigo ichie, one lifetime, one meeting. Opening the second floor window of my hotel room wide open created a difference in air current due to the heat from inside and the cold air outside. These snowflakes suspended themselves in front of my window as if they were stars. And here I should express apologies to my dear mother, who was freezing cold in that room that day in Hokkaido. So family members who are supportive are what I love about photography too. I should explain this one because it's difficult, but these are the hanging kimonos of the original diva of Madame Butterfly, which is set in Nagasaki. And these are placed at the Glover Garden in Nagasaki. So I see the possibility of a reflection. And I position myself so that the reflection will come against the dark kimono. It won't work against the red kimono, it works against the dark kimono. And I wait for 2 people to come. I've hidden myself behind a pillar so that I don't appear in the photograph. It's one of the ones in the exhibition, I guess, or when people most ask me, is that a composite? But it's real. Somewhere, as I stumbled my way along the path of photography, things started to happen slowly over time. My first photographs to garner attention and open doors for me began as an extension of my own prior life. My series of photographs made while looking out of windows drew upon my childhood experience of gazing out my Hiro Towers apartment window, looking at the quiet cityscape of Tokyo, and continued when I was working in finance in Tokyo and Wall Street, where I would continue to look out of the window and want to go outside. Sometimes we wind up running somewhat ahead of life, as this series started to garner attention here on Huffington Post when we all got stuck inside looking out of windows in the spring of 2020. The series is about hope. It's about longing. It's about the warmth of the presence of people on the inside of a room, and about seeking reconnection with a life beyond the window that, to paraphrase Shakespeare, plays out as if it were upon a stage. It was also an ode to my departed father, who, when I was 19, left us too soon. Other series would follow, like the people of Tohoku during the cherry blossom season, when the renewal of life after a long winter and the post-disaster era would feel strongest. While others documented the tragedy itself, I wanted to quietly celebrate life, not death and destruction. One day in 2017, I also decided to photograph the lives of my former colleagues in finance. One thing that was often expressed to me by them was that their skills didn't seem transferable to any other industry. So how was I making it work with photography? I don't think that's true. I think we learn to be resilient and to persevere, as well as how to overcome blocks and obstacles in order to get work done and out into the world. So many artists I know struggle with that last aspect because perfectionism gets in the way of production. But I felt their pain because I'd lived that pain too. And I'd also felt their need for release. This is Newsweek in 2020. Sometimes, and admittedly begrudgingly so, I learned to gravitate towards joy. For example, I've loved aquariums since I was a little boy. My Japanese grandfather would take me to the Otaru Aquarium. And so I started a series. It seemed like a logical next place to go after windows and glass elevators. I think it also allowed me to express a bit of humor. Mostly after, mostly making more quiet, reflective work with a darker aesthetic. But here too, there's a duality. We marvel at the creatures. Same time, we feel a little bit sorry for their existence in captivity, a little bit guilty for being there. On a side note, there are an estimated 400 aquariums in the world, and 150 of them are in Japan. So this has now turned into a monthly column that I do with the Tokyo Shimbun that just started last month. The next one comes out April 27th. But I go and photograph all these aquariums around Japan and write the words to accompany them. So I guess this is what Picasso meant when he said, view the world with the eyes of a child. I'm literally taking my childhood vision and making it my work. I also explore the mystical world of Japanese spirituality from children's stories and more. For example, Kenji Miyazawa's Night on the Galactic Railroad was a huge influence on my childhood. Here, these are fireworks. As I show you more scenes from Japan, I want to share with you a recent story. In Karuizawa, where I now live, I live on the side of a mountain, and I climb it from time to time whenever I hit a wall or feel like I need to clear my head. And one day at the top, I met a mother and her son. They had hiked up from another route. It reminded me of my own travels with my mother after my father had passed. And they asked me if I, wasn't a pickup line or anything, but did I come here often? And I said, well, yes, I live right down below. And they said, are you a photographer? And I said, yes. And they asked me, how did you come to be a photographer? He was maybe college aged. And I started asking them questions too. I discovered that, he was going to a top university in Tokyo, although he didn't say which one, and that he had offers from all the trading companies, the big shosha. I knew, it was going to be one of the three probably, right? But that he dreamed of becoming a pilot, and he was struggling with that decision about whether to go pursue his dreams or to go take the stable income. I didn't give him advice. All I did was I told him my story, and I said, you have to make that decision for yourself. It's not, I don't know your family circumstances. I can't tell you to do that. I can't sit here and tell everybody that they should go and drop whatever it is that they're doing and do something totally different. I can't. But I did tell him what it's like to lose yourself when you do something you don't really love, or that maybe you once loved, but you stopped loving it. Your daily life becomes this fog of going through the motions. It becomes a lonely and fragmented world. And you're left searching for meaning. We promised to meet again one day at the top of the mountain and parted ways. That young man wrote to me just the other day. He graduated from Keio University this spring, and he told me that he decided to pursue his dream of becoming a pilot. During the early days of the pandemic in March 2020, I was actually sick with a mysterious pneumonia that I caught at a photo festival in Houston. I came up with the idea to create a charity series of online talks like this one, featuring renowned photographers from around the world. And we ended up doing 35 episodes featuring photographers like Pete Souza of the Obama administration, photographers of all genres from around the world, Guggenheim winners, and so on and so forth. And we raised money from people who were in the audience. We reached over 300 people every week, and the videos have been seen tens of thousands of times. And we raised $70,000, all to go to charities chosen by each presenter. 100% went to charity.
やはり一回だけの人生だから夢を持つことって大事ですよね。人間って何をするにしても 夢を持ってそれを忘れずに。僕は34歳の時に金融を辞めて、で一から写真の勉強を始めたんですね。
That charity series led me to connecting with Fujifilm, who have not only been extremely supportive of my career, but helped me to amplify and reach more people so I could do more good for the world. They chose me to appear in a documentary series about photographers with inspirational stories, those who didn't just go into photography from the beginning. A couple of the members from Fujifilm who helped make this video are here tonight. And I'm grateful to them because now I can reach more people. And tomorrow, actually, later this week, we're going to Tohoku together to continue that story and the documentation. And we'll go do the cherry blossoms together and focus on that as well. So I'm grateful for them as well. I guess I should talk here at the end a little bit about my exhibition. But the funny thing is, I want to talk about this photograph, which is not in the exhibition. But what it speaks to the things that I've discovered and the things that I've done. So this is Meiji Shrine, January of 2018. We had that 8-inch snowfall day. I was still living in Tokyo then, and I went out all day, 14 hours photographing all day. And I saw that these heavily snow-laden branches would eventually drop snow, right, from the weight. And so I decided what would happen if I stood under one of them and had it drop right on my head as I made the photograph to make something different. The scene articulated and then the snow on my head. And then this wound up in the Japan Times article on me that Kit Nagamura wrote and was out a couple of days ago. So I guess it has something of a life. But what it really did was it gave me an idea that I figured out 2 years later what to do. Here's this scene. This one is in the exhibition. Coming back here to exhibit at the Tokyo American Club, where I spent many a friend's birthday party, at the bowling alley, at the pool, back from my Nishimachi days. Played basketball here on the weekends. I was in that league too. It's a full circle moment for me. I'm humbled and honored to be asked to speak to you this evening as well. And I think being able to come back home, I'm an incomplete and imperfect person, but what I am doing is living a life, a fulfilling life, going out there every day with my camera, connecting with people, meeting incredible people who are here and around the world. I think that in a nutshell is why I love photography. And really the only limits that we have are the limits we put on our own imagination. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. I noticed that all of your photography have to do with all the light.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you play that light very well. And I wonder when you want to take that particularly shots you want, do you sometimes usually have to wait for quite some time?
Yes, yes. Well, the example of the wetted rocks that I saw at the end of the video, I waited for the right wave, right? So that was the 2 hours cold weather, end of December, and my mother sat there and thought it was crazy. She was there with me then too. Everybody was away from the shore, right? And I'm right at the edge there, taking wave after wave through my hiking boots, everything. You know, just at the risk of ruining my camera, I'm sorry to the Fuji guys. But like just to make that photograph, the example of the koi, which is in the first floor lobby, if you saw it when you came in, same thing. I'm in this place in Hagi. It's an old tea house and it's got a wooden wall and it's looking down into this creek that runs along the bottom of the house. And to wait forever for the golden koi to come, because they need it to be gold. If you look at it, you could imagine it being red or blue or green. Oh, there's no blue koi, but you know, orange koi, white koi, doesn't work. Needed to be golden, and you wait. And it's the same thing with light, you know. Whenever you see things like a dust cloud that's backlit, or the flick of the blonde woman's hair on the sand dunes with her family, things like that. I mean, those are things that are happy accidents, so to speak, you know, borrow from the great Bob Ross. But, you know, we're looking for those. But again, you need to be there first, you know. Another good analogy is surfing. Some surfers seem to catch all the waves. They're in the right spot, even though like they just know where to get those photographs. And I think that's what helps.
Congratulations, George. Amazing.
Thank you.
You know, you talked about your former life and your present life, and you touched a little bit around sort of, you know, the business acumen that you basically helped you in this part. You know, what else did you take away from finance and bring through in breaking away from those chains? You know, was there anything that you sort of took with you that's really sort of helped in the current career?
One of the things is probably a certain degree of professionalism, and just that whatever the circumstances, you have to make the best of it, whether you're in finance and you're dealing with a tricky order or client, or whether you're dealing with a tricky situation with photography and so on. You do the best that you can. And so I think that, and that could happen no matter what challenging circumstances you're in. So there's that. And as I mentioned, perseverance, certainly, you know, there's a lot of ups and downs. I mean, when I first joined, it was right after 9/11, and then, you know, the NASDAQ bubble had burst, and then we had the Japanese banking crisis, and then we had the global financial crisis, and then we had, you know, Fukushima, right? And so if you can deal with those things, I think you can deal with the challenges photography sends your way too. So that definitely helps. But I think the other thing that I came to photography with was I also felt like I had so much lost time to make up for. Like everybody been doing it for so long, more than me, at least 15 years. And if I just look at my career, it's like 7 years, right? So they've been doing it already for 15 years by the time I joined the stream. So then it was like, okay, I need to work really hard. I need 15-hour days and so on, and I need to put my work out into the world, not just sit on it, you know? So that kind of drive maybe.
Thank you very much for the wonderful photos. I can see a lot of personality, patience, and yeah, it's amazing. I have a question. Every artist has their own style, personality, and their like different visions. How would you deal with clients who are not in the same vision with you? Would you take the job or would you let it go? If you take the job, how would you manage your pride, your ego, and so on? Thank you.
Oh, you kind of lose a lot of your ego when you do photography. You have to, you know. The thing is, you get told no so many times, or you get told that your work isn't good enough so many times. Like I can't tell you the number of portfolio reviews and everything. I've had hundreds of portfolio reviews, right? And sometimes you click, you find a gallery that loves your work and so on, and people love it, and other people don't, and they'll tell you that. And you got to get a thick skin and stuff like that. I'm not a commercial photographer in that sense. Like I said, the way I work is, oh, I like aquariums, so I'm going to photograph them, or, you know, things like that. And I turn them into my projects because I love them, and I know I can keep doing them if I love them. If I were to do commercial photography, then I would work with a client who understood what I bring and allow me to do that with them, in a way that I could believe in, So like a perfect example is working with Fujifilm, is that they let me tell my story beautifully without me having to say, well, and I use this lens and I use that, they're wonderful about that. And so I would want to keep that part of it. That was something that I was thinking about a lot this morning when I was thinking about, oh yeah, now I have to exhibit and I have to try and sell my work and like all of that kind of thing. Like I said, putting value on what you do. So I would work with clients that would honor what I do and understand what I do. And it would be vice versa then, Yeah.
Wonderful work.
Thank you.
It feels like visual essays, just it's a photograph, but 1,000 words are behind it. My question is related to the last two, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So the question was about what lessons in finance were applicable to your new your vocation.
Mm-hmm.
What should we take away from photography that we could apply to, frankly, what sounds like a boring life now after yours? Like just from everyday life. Like, what would you say are your lessons from photography on everyday responsibilities and career and et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a few different elements to that. One is just actually realizing that everyday life is enough and it's worthy of documenting. Now, a caveat, right? Like we have way too many, a nod here to a gentleman in the audience. I won't necessarily say his name, but I was having a conversation with him yesterday. He knows who he is. And talking about, how taking photographs of yourself eating food and posting it, and it becomes part of the 40 billion and so on. And we maybe don't need that, but your family, even yourself with your family, the things that you want to remember, having a camera there and photographing it every day. And honestly, part of it is, it's okay in your smartphones, but then it's lost in this whole sea of a million other things. It is nice to have a camera, for an occasion with your family. And maybe it's a wedding or maybe it's a birthday party or something like that, and to take pictures. Make pictures with a camera because it's there. It's this memory box that is separate from all the other million wonderful functions that a smartphone has, but doesn't, gets lost with everything else. So yeah, photographing your family and all of that, and knowing that daily life is enough if you can say something interesting with it. And I know so many people who, also used photography as a way to start going out, walk places. If you're using a camera and you're going to a destination, all of a sudden the destination becomes part of the fun. It's no longer just a commute on the Yamanote line, but what can I see out the window? Oh man, maybe I'll do a series of like all the stations that I hit on the Yamanote line when I go to work, or things like that. There's inspiration all around you, and it doesn't have to be amazing, but so many people I know start at any point in life. That's the thing about a camera and photography, is you can start it. We have people that, Fernanda, who works with me and stuff, when we teach people, we have people who start at like 80 and they love it. And that's awesome. So yeah, that photography is for everybody, You don't have to magically learn how to sculpt something. Those are incredible artists. And me, I'm an ex-trader who picked up a camera and thought it was cool, So it's possible for anybody.
Thank you. We've got one question from online here.
Okay.
George Brett Erickson here.
Oh.
Could you please tell the audience a bit more about how allegory, such as Shinto tales and photographs meeting Japanese artistic tradition and others, feature in your TAC show?
So of course, Brett, who was the first photography teacher that I introduced, so he's watching from Nebraska. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Brett. And of course, he asks us a question about allegory and so on, because that's what he is. He's a professor, and that's, yeah. Yes, I love parables, allegory, metonymy, synecdoche, all of that kind of thing. There are little things in the photographs that are hints to other things. Maybe if you come for the gallery tour, I can show you some examples. I don't like to necessarily like explain to everybody, over-explain a photo. You either connect with it or you don't. But I'll take cues, for example, like a fox from the US will be next to a shrine from Japan and things like that. You can start to find clues because, you know, the fox is a messenger god of Shintoism and so on. So you can start to find clues like that in the layout of it. But thanks, Brett. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
What is the most important thing when you take a photo? You just said you wait until the time comes. So maybe you have if you see some scenery, you have a kind of idealistic or desirable time to take a photo. So please let me know what is the most important thing.
I think the most important thing is feel something and listen to that voice. So that feeling could be anything. It could be natsukashisa, like nostalgia of sorts, right? Oh, I remember when that book when I was a child, or you know, something like that. It could be humor, like a walrus, you know, and the boy, like, oh my God, you know. It could be sadness. Light can be sad. It could be happy. All sorts of things. We experience that around. It's just sort of becoming aware when you feel something. Talk about my window series. How many windows have I probably seen during the last 7 years? I don't know, millions, right? Did I photograph all of them? No, I photographed the ones where I felt something when I walked into that room. So it's the same thing. I think the most important thing I think that gets forgotten about photography is all the compositional rules, like rule of thirds, middle, whatever. Honestly, they're made to be broken. So I have my voice, my style, so to speak. I prefer the word voice, but and I photograph that way, but that's not the only way. It's not just the right way. There's many right ways, or you know, many ways to solve a problem. So don't worry so much about the compositional thing, but listen to your voice. I identify with that, you know, I like this, and yeah.
I have a question. So it's very clear how Arthur and Sam have influenced your work. Would you talk about how they sort of are in the landscape of your mind as far as like differentiating yourself from them and finding your voice in opposition to them, but also in step with them as well?
In that sense, a different photographer early on when I started gave me a really good bit of advice. His name is Arno Raphael Minkinen, and he's a Finnish-American photographer. He has made a career, a life's work of making black and white film, now digital, I suppose, but self-portraits, nude in the landscape. And you would think that that is a very sort of one-trick pony kind of way to be, but it isn't. I really encourage you to look him up and see the variety of his work. It's in museums everywhere, all around the world. But what he said was that in your photographic journey or any career journey, you're going to encounter mentors and influences, people who affect your work. But what it is you're on a bus journey and you need to stay on your bus, i.e., I encounter Sam, I encounter Brett, I encounter Arthur Kate Brakey and Amy Tunsing and Nusha Tavakolian and all these amazing photographers along the way. And I could just get off there and do what they do, or I could stay on the bus. And as you keep going on your bus and you encounter all these people, you take little bits of influence from them, but you've become this unique person with a unique voice because you have carried on with your journey. And so I think I've done that. And I think Arthur and Sam would tell you that I photograph things differently now. I showed you the evolution of my work using the Sam methods and Arthur methods and so on, but I don't know anybody else who deliberately tries to ruin his camera equipment, you know, at the moment. And maybe there are, but you know, that's obviously not what I'm trying to do. I'm, you know, being facetious, but trying to redefine what a decisive moment can be. Is it that one person leaping, or can we instead do something different? And I'm not a complete work. As I said, I'm imperfect, I'm incomplete in so many ways, and I'm still just carrying on that journey. Thanks everyone.
Thank
thank you everyone for joining us tonight.